Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the You Only Live Twice podcast. I'm Dr. Ray. This is Dr. Marwa. Alhamdulillah, we're flying. We're a duo today. We're missing Jess, but alhamdulillah, she'll be back next week, inshallah. So I want to pick right up where we left off. We're not going to leave with any suspense or anything like that, right? So we are many, many weeks removed from Will Smith's situation where he slapped Chris Rock. But I have been dying to have a conversation about your reaction, your thoughts, and let's like break this down Islamically, psychologically.
Hmm.
What was your immediate reaction to seeing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was initially confusion. When I first saw the reaction, I was like, "Oh, he's laughing." So
Yeah.
you initially feel like you just feel kind of taken aback by the shift in his reaction after he looked at his wife, and then it went to that opposite extreme. And whenever you see something like that, you think of you think that there's a disconnect here, right? Like this person is not being himself. He's not really being authentic in that moment. You could tell, like, how do you go? I mean, I understand that sometimes when you're in that environment and you're in a laughing kind of mood, or there's already jokes in place and things like that.
Mhm.
I understand that sometimes people can laugh at something and then take a moment to think about it. But I think, and then they're like, wait, that wasn't funny. Wait.
Yeah.
But I think in this moment, it wasn't that. I think it was that he looked at her and he saw that reaction, and then I felt almost like he felt that if he didn't do something in that moment, he would have been lesser in her eyes, or lesser of a man,
Yes.
or. So
Yes.
yeah, it was initially confusing, and it makes you sad too. Like, obviously not excusing his behavior, but it just makes you sad to see somebody. It's like you could feel like he was broken down.
Yes. And so, look, I have a lot of those same reactions too, right? I
Mhm,
was confused. I didn't know what happened. I woke up and found a
mhm.
message from my brother with the video. And I was like, wait, this doesn't make any sense,
Yeah,
right? But first of all, I was very angry when I saw it.
really.
Right? I was hot when I saw it, only because I don't like to see people get picked on,
Mhm.
right? And I immediately felt like Will Smith did that to somebody who's not a tough guy.
Mm.
So now we, growing up, we used to say you picking and choosing,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
You're ducking other people and then you're choosing other people, right?
Mm,
But
okay,
for
yeah,
him, to me, it felt like bullying,
yeah.
right? And you choose someone who you know is not going to fight you back, and you don't immediately. In my mind, I wanted to put on Instagram, but I'm trying to be all that, I'm trying to
Yeah.
go on Instagram. I'm like, just show us the video of you slapping the guy who slept with your wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Send us the video of you and him squaring up in your house after he was sleeping with your wife for however long he was messing around. Like if you really hitting people for disrespecting your wife, which you won't find. And to me, that's really what upset me. Like picking and choosing and picking on people. It felt you know, like Will Smith took out his anger and frustration on somebody who he knew wasn't going to fight him back.
Mm.
And we see this a lot in counseling.
Yeah,
People punch down.
yeah,
And to me, that's what it felt. It felt like what I feel like when abusers abuse people,
yeah.
right? Like
Yes.
you're picking on someone who is probably not going, and you have the element of surprise,
Mm.
the whole thing. And after a few days, a lot of other thoughts started to come to mind. I did a video about Chadwick Boseman when he passed away.
Mhm.
I talked about um, how people were making fun of him online when the pictures of him being very, very thin, right, and he looked sick, and people were teasing him and making fun of him. I don't know if you knew about that. Did you ever see that?
I didn't know they were making fun of him, no.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the memes and stuff like
You mean
that.
at the
People,
time, before they knew that he had
yeah, yeah.
cancer?
Nobody knew
Mm.
because nobody has seen him for a long time,
Yeah,
and then the picture came out with him, and his face was standing like he just looked like a rail, right?
yeah.
and everybody's going crazy, tease him, tease him, tease him. Then he died like right after that, like maybe like a couple of
Wow.
weeks after that. Then he died, boom, out of nowhere.
Mhm.
And so I made a video about like how in social media we entertain ourselves with what we see from the people, and we don't know, right, that we're entertaining ourselves with their suffering. We don't know what's going on with them. We didn't know why he looked like that. It wasn't for a role. People speculate. Is it for a role? You know, what's going
Yeah.
on? And then it immediately started to occur to me, like, while I'm not giving Will a pass, because he did it was a sucker move. Like nothing's going
Mhm.
to change that. But then I started to think to myself, have we been entertaining ourselves with his pain too?
Yeah.
Right? Like we make
Mhm.
fun of him and we tease him, and I'm guilty of it too, making fun of him. I get the memes and we laugh and joke, and it's just
Yeah.
huh? Go ahead.
No, no, I said I was laughing because you made me think of the memes.
Yes, yeah. And it's funny, and but
Yeah.
because it's funny and we're so detached from the lived experience of the person, you know, we don't know emotionally, psychologically what they're going through and how much we add to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? By joking and laughing about them. And to me, he seemed like you said, he's
Mhm.
a broken man,
Yeah.
right? Like he's had enough. And he did that. It felt like he was powerless. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And this is the exasperation at having been powerless for so long. You just lash out.
Yeah. There was a moment, the moment when he was saying, "Get your, get
Keep
my
my
wife's
wife's
name
name.
out of,"
Yeah,
yeah. He looked scared. If you
yeah,
really take a look at that, like that clip, and you see, like, I feel like that's somebody who is mustering courage, as much courage as they could in that moment to say what they needed to say. But I don't know, his eyes looked scared to me for some
yeah,
reason. And it looked like he was afraid of even that moment, and like
yeah,
afraid of what he was doing in that moment.
yeah,
And it's sad. And I really appreciate what you said about, us just nowadays being desensitized, to other people's. And it's true, like we get these memes and we laugh, and um, you know, uh, like sometimes you watch these clips, and I'm thinking even just for me, like watching like like people, a meme or a video mock, like making making fun, or like making light of a situation and things like that, and we do laugh, right?
yeah,
And you just, and I think that's just like the harm of this online world nowadays, is that you end up being desensitized a little bit. Like you feel other people's pain, and I definitely am connect like feel other people's pain as well. But I think what's happening is that in the world we live in, I think people feel other people, they feel like, okay, this person's struggling. But it's when you don't know the context and you don't have that knowledge, you just always like there's this assumption that you can just, like, it's free range to
yeah.
like laugh, and yeah.
I'm just laughing. What am I doing?
Yeah.
They're putting it out there. And what we don't really
Yeah.
realize, you think of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he talks
Mhm.
about that. We can say something that to us is very light, but with Allah is very weighty.
Yeah.
And it reminds me that we're not watching Will Smith and
Mhm.
Jada and their nonsense. We're watching a woman destroy a man,
Mm.
right? And we
Mhm.
don't we don't really always take that into consideration.
Mhm.
This is the idea, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, cursing the woman who makes the private relationship, especially the intimate relationship between a husband and a wife,
Yeah.
known, talking
Mhm.
about it to the people, to their friends, all of these kinds of things. And
Mhm.
it, the more I thought about it, over the day that I saw it and was seeing all of the reactions, I started thinking to myself, Alhamdulillah for Islam.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah for Islam that guides us and protects us, because when whatever their issue was that got out, you're supposed
Mhm.
to wrap that up, cover that up. We're not talking about it. And they went the other way.
Mhm.
They were like, we're going to talk about it more and we're going to go into it more. And you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And
Yeah.
letting all of that stuff out, you can see how it was destroying Will.
Mhm. I don't know a lot about that situation.
Oh,
I do remember, seeing something, a clip or something, people saying that she's talking about that private life on her Red Table Talk, but I didn't assume it was true. I just thought people were just saying that about her. Yeah.
no, no, she had him on. I mean, whenever opportunity she got to talk about it,
Mhm.
she talked about it. And you can see him, it wasn't necessarily that he was talking about it. It felt like more he was being confronted about it.
Mm. It's interesting you say that because after the Will Smith situation, after this whole situation with Chris Rock, um, I was looking at some clips that people started to share about Jada's
Yeah,
lives with Will, and there was one that really was just made me uncomfortable where she just went live and basically like she goes up to him and she's asking him these questions and he doesn't answer her questions on while she's on live. He says he says something about like that he would like some notice or like he would
yeah,
like her to respect. I don't remember the words exactly, but something about like he'd like a heads up before she puts him on the spot like
yeah,
that, basically. And she continued to videotape him, and then she responds and she makes light make minimizes it, and she says,
yeah,
"Okay," like, basically, like, almost as if Will is the one who has the attitude,
yeah,
and that's see, that stuff like that really bothers me when people, like when people minimize other people's feelings when it's right in front of them, and I think, like, in that situation, that's a breach of boundary once
oh,
again, so it kind of reflects that what you're talking about. I didn't hear her do the, like, talk about, breach that boundary in the other light that a lot of people are talking about, but I saw this and I was like, "Hmm, this is this is her not respecting his boundaries,"
yep.
and he you could tell he's really uncomfortable, and he's just almost froze, and it's that same feeling. You feel like he's frozen. It reminded me of a person who's scared of conflict and scared to
Yes,
speak up for himself, like,
yeah.
almost like a someone who struggles with codependency, right? Like, somebody who's like they're attached to this person, and they need this person for their worth, and they're so afraid of losing this person, so afraid of so afraid of conflict because they're so used to conflict from her, that I felt like he was trying to communicate what he wanted without, like, hurting her
Jeopardizing the
feelings.
relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yep,
but if
yep.
he had like, you could tell he was holding back. He was, like, really, like, stiff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that speaks to, I think that speaks to a lot. You know, I can see the codependency that you're talking about,
Mm.
but there's also an element of emasculation,
Yes,
you
yeah.
know, and so when you mentioned it earlier, to see that he went up there and he Cypress Rock more because he was responding to her, right?
Mhm.
It's like, where is him? Right?
Yeah.
Where is he as a person? And again, we're not in their minds to know, but and to give everybody some context about why we're talking about this, because we want you to look at your relationships.
Yeah.
What kind of dynamic, do I have something similar to? Because there's nothing I can tell you, Marwa, as a man, and this is one
Mhm.
thing we, inshallah, we'll cover this as a discussion topic in episode. It
Yeah.
it is actually, believe it or not, with all of the
Mhm.
privilege of being a man, there
Mhm.
is a lot of like emotional difficulty, hardship, like
Yeah.
stress and weight of being a father, of being a provider, of being a husband,
Yeah.
that a lot of that stuff doesn't get attended to.
Mhm.
Right. And just like women lose their identities in their relationships, you become a parent and a spouse and all that, it can be easy to lose yourself. I think that
Yeah.
a lot of men experience the same thing too. And I
Yeah.
and there's nothing more devastating than feeling like your wife does not respect you as a man.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because that's my whole role, right? Like,
Mhm.
as much as we could be woke about it, right?
Mhm.
My role is as the man, the husband, the provider, the protector, you know, part of the backbone of the family. And when you usurp that from me, and I can't adjust it with you. I can't, you know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? Like, I can't lash out, whatever, for whatever reason.
Mhm.
It starts to eat you alive. It
Yeah.
starts to eat you alive. And I'm while you're talking, I'm remembering the Red Table Talk with her and Will. and how much it's weird. It's
Mm,
gaslighting, like
mm,
Olympian gaslighting.
mm,
She's sitting with him so they can talk about the affair that she won't call an affair, and she won't admit what she did and didn't do. Why does she have this man on TV then? Why invite me here to have this conversation with you about what happened? You
mm.
won't tell me what happened, and you won't acknowledge the details of what happened. And so you just brought me here to gaslight me and to see me squirm.
That's so scary to me. That's like that's just like, oh my God, just I didn't watch it. I'm gonna have to go watch it now and see like
Oh, it's
how that dynamic
painful.
was,
It's
but
painful.
that is
Bill
just really disturbing, you know?
Bill Maher, he brought up the idea of toxic femininity,
Mhm.
right? And I know that we get a lot of trouble around like blaming women for things, but the reality of it is there are toxic men and there are toxic women,
Mhm.
right? And we should be allowed to say that a
They're
woman,
both.
yes, a woman being toxic doesn't mean that a woman has to say to me, "What about toxic men?" Okay, they're going to get episode 5. Like, let's do that, right?
We
Like,
cover that. Yeah.
but
Yeah,
like this is a reality that actually exists.
it is. Yeah.
And a lot of men, their pain is unseen. You've
Mhm.
seen this, I've seen it a lot. A
Yeah.
lot of men, their pain is unseen because we're almost desensitized
Mhm.
to the reality of what men go through because every man is seen as being from amongst the toxic people. So whatever he goes through from a woman, he must have put her through it. It must be somehow his fault. He's not telling you the whole truth and so on. But sometimes the reality of it is that
Mhm.
you have someone who is unwell.
Yeah. You mean, the part your partner, like
Yeah,
that person's yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God, there's so much to unpack here. I think that, yeah, it is a sensitive issue, and I think that there's a sensitivity about talking about toxic feminism, toxic femininity, right? And it's because and it's because of the shift in the world, and it's because of a lot of hurt and pain that many women received at the hands of men, right? And I think
Hmm.
but what happened is I think what leads to toxic feminism or toxic, femininity is that when you respond to something by going to the opposite extreme,
Yeah,
right? And so
yeah.
sometimes, a lot of times people will ask me like, are you a feminist? Like, I've gotten that question before, which is strange that people just like ask you that, right? Like, and I'll always say, like, it depends what kind of feminism you're talking
Yeah.
about. I can't just give an answer because there's different perspectives of feminism. There's different models of it. There's different perceptions of it. And so, like, I always respond with, if you're talking about a God-centered feminism where I understand that I'm equal, but I'm different. And I
Mhm.
understand my value is not based on me being the same as a man, or that I have to demean men in order for me to feel valued or worthy in society, then um, wait, yeah, like, so I'm not it's not that's not the kind of feminism, right? So that we're talking about. So I definitely see like this extreme shift, and I see a lot of double standards, especially when you work with people who have difficulty in their relationship. You see it now where it's like the opposite end, where you see, because of this fear of being a toxic masculine man and
Mhm.
fear of fitting that mold that society now is putting men into, and it's like they're afraid. A lot of men are afraid, and again, this can go both ways, right? but
But
it's
it's a shame you have to say that. It's
but
a
that
shame you have to make
experience,
sure you say that
yeah.
because
Yeah,
somebody's gonna
see,
say,
we have
"Oh,
to
what
say that,
about?"
yeah. But
Yeah.
that experience is existing for men, and that experience is there. There are a lot of men who feel like they can't talk about their pain because that makes them weak, right? Or they feel like, if there's just double standards where it's like,
Yeah.
for example, as you were talking about the Will Smith thing, I'm just wondering if the tables were turned and it was Will Smith talking about Jada and their intimate relationship,
Oh my God.
the world would have reacted. Social media
Yes.
would have reacted. That's
Yeah.
so disrespectful. How can you talk about her like that? that's like abusive, right?
Black men don't respect their queens. Da da
Yeah,
da.
exactly.
Yep.
Like they would have, right? So they
Yep.
would have twisted it and they would have so there's a lot of things happening now where sometimes I take a step back and I say like if it was the opposite, how would we react? And just from that asking that question, I know that there's a double standard. Same
Yep.
thing with like this is a whole other issue that we can get into another time, but like the whole like if you look at like shows, movies, like a lot of shows, especially around family, it's so okay for a woman to slap a man.
Yeah.
It's normalized. It's normalized. It's almost like, and then it's like if the guy, like it's like if the guy gets upset, it's like what you're not masculine
Yeah.
enough to
Yeah.
take that
Yeah.
slap,
Yeah.
So it's almost like get slapped, and being a man means that you say nothing about it.
Correct.
So it's not even like that they're reacting and like slapping back. No, it's that they're not even like they're afraid to say like, "Hey, that's not okay. You don't hit me."
Yep.
And it's the same, it's as horrible as me hitting you,
Yep.
and it's like this is happening a lot where now it's leading to a lot of domestic like abuse cases where men are the victims but they don't speak up because society has normalized it and society has demasculated the man who is a victim of that.
Yep.
So that's we can get into that a different time, but yeah, there is a lot of double standards. And again, I appreciate you saying like men do have their privilege and that is something that also needs to be acknowledged and checked. But yeah, it's like we should still be able to talk about, just like toxic masculinity, we should be able to talk about
Correct.
toxic feminism and what that
Correct.
looks like as well.
And I think that what you're getting close to is our discussion. Inshallah, we're going to talk about Johnny Depp
Oh
and
yeah.
Amber Heard.
Yeah.
We're getting
That's
very
going to be
close to that
interesting.
because that's a lot. Look, and these are both examples of, like you said, your
Mhm.
privilege gets thrown back at you,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to tell someone, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
like that this is happening to you. Who's going to believe you, right? Like, who's going to
Yeah.
how are you going to look? Oh, aren't you going to be
That's
ashamed?
what
Aren't you
Amber
going
said. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and look, this is the same thing. This is the same thing that happens when you look at sexual assault with Muslim women in
Mhm.
particular, right?
Mhm.
A lot of times the young girls, right? Like, so we're talking about teenage girls, right?
Mhm.
College age girls who get sexually assaulted. A lot of reasons why they don't come forward is because they're going to go to their families first before they go to anyone. And
Mhm.
they're afraid that if you go and you say, Mama, Baba, this happened to me, that they're going to say, well, why were you there in the first place? Oh, you're bringing shame on the family,
Yeah.
and so on and so on and so
They're
on.
going to
And
be
so,
blamed.
so a lot of people take advantage of that, right? A
Mhm.
lot of people know that you're vulnerable because you have so many barriers to seeking justice against
Mhm.
me for what I've done to you. And this is somewhat in the same vein that with men, it's like, well, you're really going to embarrass yourself like that?
Mhm.
You're going to go and put this out there that this is going on in your own home, that you can't handle,
Yeah.
a woman in and so a lot of guys will just kind of suffer through that and
Mhm.
deal with that and not know how to address it, because how do I address a woman who is being psychologically abusive, emotionally abusive, physically abusive, right?
Yeah.
What's my recourse? I know if it was a man what I would do.
Yeah.
Men know how to deal with men who are like that, but
Yeah.
it's hard because we just fight it out, right?
Mhm.
You can't do that with a woman. And a lot of times you'll find that the men are either coming from, they got their own emotional trauma that puts them at a disadvantage in responding to it emotionally, or the only one way they know how to respond to these situations is with aggression and violence, which obviously is
Mhm.
the option that they take off the table. And so they just kind of remain stuck in the cycle,
Yeah.
right? And so, we gotta, I'm gonna transition inshallah to our next topic, but
Mhm.
I think that it bears so much more talking about,
Yeah.
right? Like we
Yeah.
we really have to talk about the realities of, for men and women, what it's like to be in these dynamics, and
Yeah.
giving both people the tools to actually respond to them, like
Yeah.
in an emotionally effective way, in an Islamically correct way, in a way that obviously we want to please Allah Subhanahu wa Taala.
Yeah.
So look, I want to bring this other issue up then, right?
Mhm.
Because it feels like it dovetails very well,
Mhm.
right? So you talked about codependence, right? And
Mhm.
we have, I like to call it, I've been saying this since like 2009. It's a shame
Mhm.
it's a problem, that we have this epidemic of flakiness, right?
Mm.
Like people, when you meet with people, what's one of the number one complaints they bring to you is feeling so disconnected,
Mm.
feeling like they don't have meaningful relationships. And so, what I wanted to bring up was the idea that not only are we as people in general, especially Muslims, feeling disconnected from people,
Mhm.
but because we feel so disconnected, we find ourselves vulnerable
Mhm.
to holding on to unhealthy relationships and doing unhealthy things in order to sustain them, right? We do drugs because we hold on to relationships that we shouldn't. We
Mhm.
continue to accept mistreatment and abuse,
Mhm.
um, social pressure, um, committing zina, staying in a physical romantic relationship that we know that we shouldn't. And, there's so many different things that we do, um, that are very, very emotionally, spiritually damaging for us,
Mhm.
just so that we're not alone,
Mm.
right? What have been your experiences with this, and
Mhm.
what's been your reaction to all of the times that you've seen it come across to you?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think one of the most like prevalent issues today is people feeling more isolated than ever.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you've experienced this like more recently as a therapist in your therapy work, but like I feel like more than I've ever seen, people are extremely lonely and
Yeah.
extremely isolated.
Yes.
And it's really sad, disturbing, scary because like we are not meant to be isolated like that,
No.
And I think that see, this is interesting because I don't think the sole responsibility is also on the individual. I think if you look at Islam, right, there
Mhm.
is this concept of communal responsibility, collective
Yeah.
responsibility to the individual. And there's that individual responsibility. Of course, Allah will hold a person responsible for what is in his capacity, right?
Correct.
I think we're missing a lot of that community responsibility, to be honest with
Hmm.
you. People are walking into spaces where people don't say salam alaikum to them.
Yeah.
People are not making space for people in Taraweeh. People are um, going to gatherings and feeling like they're not like seen or heard
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
acknowledged. Like basic etiquettes that we're taught part of our communal responsibility are not being placed. Like I had someone recently tell me like I was sitting in a gathering and this person was really affected by this, that she was sitting in a gathering and the other group of girls were just in a conversation while she was like in that group, but like left
Hmm.
out. And I was thinking of the what the Prophet ﷺ taught us that if there's two people, right, like
Hmm.
that if three people are sitting, I'm paraphrasing, I'm just
Right.
saying the meaning, right? That if there are three people in a gathering, basically, that two people should not be like whispering
That's right.
to each other or saying something at the person, right? And so these are things we have to be conscious of. We all may fall into it, right? It's
Correct.
just being conscious of our responsibility. So what I'm seeing is that there are a lot of people longing for that belonging, longing for that sense of community, longing for, and it's becoming very superficial. People are more flakier than ever. I can't begin to tell you how many of my clients will say things like, I made plans and the person they didn't show. What should I do? Like, is it okay for me to be upset that like they
Yeah.
didn't get back to me or whatnot? And I'm just like that's hurtful. Like it's
Yeah.
valid. Like, but in the world we live in, it's almost like society is gaslighting people.
Gaslighting. Yes.
It's almost like we don't need to show up. We don't need to stay true to our word. We don't need to be consistent. We can be flaky. And if you have a problem with it and you actually communicate it, you're the
You're
problem.
making trouble. Why are you
You're
make why are
making
you making a
trouble.
big deal out of this? Why don't you just
Yeah.
let me do what I want to be doing, no
Mhm.
matter how much it affects you?
Exactly, exactly. So I think there's so much like gaslighting going on where
Yep.
people are nefsi nefsi and they don't want and I'm sure we've had those experiences, right? Where like you communicate to someone, hey, listen, like these are my boundaries, like, or like not even you say those words, but like, hey, next time you don't show up, just let me know.
Talk to me.
Just send me
Yes,
a text. And they get
yes,
upset, and it just like you makes you I personally been in that position where like, I wait a few times to see if this happens again or whatever. And then if it's something that's consistent, then I'll say like, hey, listen, like I understand things come up, but let me know. And I've had
mhm,
experiences where the person gets upset and it catches you off guard, right? You're
yeah.
like, oh my God, wait,
Am I
like
tripping?
yeah,
Yeah,
and so I think so I can relate to that feeling, but
yeah.
when I'm seeing it now, you have no idea, like almost every
All the
week,
time. No,
all the
that's
time,
yes,
people's biggest tests right now, I have to say, are other people,
yes. The
and they're
way we treat each other.
and the way we're treated, yeah, and this feeling that keeps this like feeling that I keep seeing nowadays is very consistent in people is just feeling unseen and unheard. They feel
Hmm.
invisible, they feel lonely, and we know the psychology of loneliness and how that exacerbates other struggles and exacerbates, symptoms of depression. It really does, like,
Yes.
we're meant to have khalwa with Allah, alone time with Allah. We're meant to sit with ourselves. We're meant to have a balance of having time with ourselves, but we're not meant to be isolated.
Yes.
And so
Deprived.
deprived.
Deprived of
Yeah.
social contact and
Yeah.
meaningful relationships. But look, that speaks to what you're saying.
Mhm.
The importance of it speaks to why we're willing to go to such lengths
Yeah.
to hold on to a bad situation,
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
Where the reality is that we're getting hurt twice. We get
Mhm.
hurt by what the person is doing to make us feel unimportant, like we don't matter,
Mhm.
unworthy, and it a lot of times reinforces we got into the situation because we might have had a self-esteem issue. And then their treatment of us reinforces ideas we have in our head. And
Right,
then
yeah.
on top of that, we acquiesce to them. They treat us poorly and we accept it, hoping that we're going to get better because of it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so that hurts us, and then we never do.
yeah.
I've been so patient with what you've been doing to me, hoping that one day you would understand how I feel. And you're never part of it is to recognize you got to change this dynamic because you're never going to get that.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to accept for a
Yes.
lot of people, yeah.
Unless some external thing comes along and forces that person to realize what they're doing and
Mhm,
realize the value of changing,
mhm,
they're not just going to voluntarily do it. Now, you talked about uh, boundaries, right?
mhm.
And so I want you to talk about, like, just the importance of even Islamically what Allah Azza wa Jal has explained to us, laid out for us in our religion about the importance of boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, whenever I think of boundaries from an Islamic perspective, I always think of Surah Al-Hujurat for some like, that's the first surah that always comes up in my heart because it's like, that's the surah where we're taught to, like, how to approach, how the people were taught to approach the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? But we have in our faith, like, such an emphasis on respect for other people's boundaries. Like, when you go to someone's house and you knock on their door, you have to step back after you knock on their door to give them space so you're not all in their space, right? And like, there's just so much, like, respect, even like just that example I gave with, like, when there's people in a gathering, right? Like, there's just like this emphasis of being considerate,
Yes.
consideration,
Yeah.
and I think that's what aggravates people a lot. It's not necessarily that people make mistakes. It's not necessarily it's that when people don't aren't cultivating hearts that are considerate of other hearts.
Yep.
And I think that's what creates that feeling of, like, feeling hurt and upset. It's like, did you not even think of me?
Yeah.
You do
Show
not
me that my
even think,
feelings matter.
yeah, did you not even think of how I might feel in that situation? And I
Yep.
think it's becoming such a nefsi culture, me culture, where people are becoming less able to, like, put themselves in other people's shoes.
Yeah.
Like, when, my client was telling me about the situation about her being in that group and the group left, and I, was thinking like, oh, let me, like, put myself in that group. Let's see, like, what kind of, trying to give her like a different ways. But then, but thinking about it, I'm like, that's really hard. Like, I can't imagine
Yeah.
being in a group, seeing somebody who is part of our group and us, like, getting, you know what I mean? And us not including her or whatever. It just, so it's like, but these things are happening more and more. And I think for a lot of people who are doing that work and who are people who are not naturally considerate or were taught these values, it's hard for them to accept, like you said, that reality that there are just some people who don't.
Yes. Yes.
And you can communicate, but you can't force people
Right.
to change, you
And,
know?
and you have to be willing to let them go, because what you get from letting them go, which is our ultimate worst fear,
Mhm.
but what you get by letting them go, the self-respect that you get from being able to establish that boundary, and
Right.
your ability to bring that to your next relationship where you're able to communicate that verbally, non-verbally to people, by the way
Mhm.
that you carry yourself, the relationships that you will and will not even entertain or allow yourself to get involved in.
Mhm.
That's going to be more valuable for you long term than whatever it
Yeah.
is that you're going to get by holding on to this person short term, that when they're done with you, they're going to use you up and be gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because there's one thing that we didn't uh that I want to bring up, right?
Mhm.
We are, even as Muslims, unfortunately,
Mhm.
we are a people who really struggle with accountability.
Mm.
I think that it is such a part of at least American culture,
Mhm.
right? Now you will find this in all Americans, right? Egyptian
Mhm.
Americans, Asian Americans, Black Americans. You
Mhm.
will find it all throughout us. And I don't know about other countries to speak on that, but I know whoever's here
Mhm.
really struggles, no matter what nationality you're coming from or any of that kind of stuff. Whatever your cultural background is, I
Yeah.
find it to be relatively universal.
Mhm.
We don't like to be held accountable. The reason I say that that's American culture is because in American culture, you have freedom,
Mm.
right? And that freedom is interpreted as I have freedom to do what I want,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And are you impinging on my freedom to do what I want? And we've taken it to such an extreme that I'm free to do what I want, even at your expense,
Mm.
even if it hurts you. And don't force me to have to adjust who I am and what I'm doing and who I'm being if it affects you or if it hurts you,
Mm. I
right?
see. Mm.
It's kind of like a 30,000 square 30,000 foot view of it, but really on the individual level, it's I told you I was going to be here on a certain day and I was going to meet you there on a certain day.
Mhm.
And I just flaked on you. Period. I just didn't show up. And then when you bring it up to me, oh my God, then let's just not be friends then.
Mm.
Right? Then that's their solution. The solution isn't you know what, you're right, and I should have communicated with you. The solution is, well, then don't be my friend.
Mm.
Don't stay connected to me if you need me to be better towards you.
Yeah. If you can't handle me mistreating you, you can't handle me mistreating you? You're not okay with that?
Oh
You
my God.
know?
Or
Yeah.
or I hit you with the Jedi mind trick and I
Mhm.
get you to start caretaking me.
Mhm.
Oh my God, I'm just the worst friend. And you
Mhm.
say all these things. What are they gonna say?
Yeah, then I personally, like, had that situation where, like, then you go into that mode of like, "No, you're a great friend. You're nice," it's like,
You know?
you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's interesting, but it happens a lot for a lot of people that and unfortunately, when you don't do the work on yourself, a lot of times people don't, like, they're just uncomfortable with being
Yeah.
addressed, that they're fighting and doing whatever it is, from guilt to manipulation to whatever it is, to just make that person, not feel like, make that person back off so they don't have to feel what they
Yeah.
did was wrong,
Yeah.
and so projecting, right?
And you know what's funny? I feel like, and I'm sorry, I'm going to change the subject,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I feel like that contributes to our inability to find out what are the Islamic limits of being assertive.
Hmm.
right? Because no one knows people, and I find this a lot, that people feel trapped,
Yes.
right? Oh, I
Trap, you
have to
said,
be
right? You said
pious.
trap.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
I have to be pious. I have to be kind with the believers,
Mhm,
and I must be understanding and fear
mhm.
Allah and gracious and all of these things. But what
Yeah,
happens is, I used to say, don't abuse my piety,
yeah. Mhm.
right? Don't abuse my. Oh, ain't you supposed to fear Allah?
My God.
People accept a lot of mistreatment because they've kind of taken this dichotomous, it's all or
Mhm.
nothing approach
Yeah.
to setting a boundary, standing your ground, communicating what's acceptable or not, and
Mhm.
or I'm just afraid to hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah.
And I'm making myself responsible for your feelings. And so if you mistreat me or you're not good to me, and
Mhm.
I say it to you, if I hurt your feelings or you're offended by it, no matter how or what I said, even if I bring it to you in the best way, if you're upset about it, I'm responsible now to resolve that
Right. Yeah.
because I want to be a good Muslim. Go
Mhm.
ahead. Sorry.
No, no, no. I'm taking it all in. I'm just, like honestly, it's funny because I just launched like my codependency program, right, recently.
I saw. May Allah
And
make
one of the
it.
reasons why I even decided to launch is because I feel like codependency is one of those things that can be easily masked by the spiritual experience,
Oh yeah.
by the religious experience. So many Muslims are struggling with codependency. And the reason, codependency gets stronger if
Yeah.
it's masked, if it's
Yeah.
hidden. And so I think for a lot of people, it went unnoticed. It was almost taken as like, oh, this is normal because I'm being good. I'm being good to other people. I'm prioritizing other people. And for so many people, it's like, Islam is abused, not used. Islam
Yeah.
is abused as a mask for our wounds,
That's right.
and with codependency, it's one of the easiest ways to do that because it's about putting other people's
Yes.
needs before you. So
Yes.
it's so easy to be like, but I'm being a good Muslim. I stayed quiet because Allah doesn't like those who argue.
Yes. This it's a
And
sublimation. In
mhm,
psychology, it's a sublimation. You
yeah,
find a socially acceptable way to do a
yeah,
socially unacceptable thing. We
yeah.
know that accepting this treatment is unacceptable. And so where
Mhm.
do we hide it? In
Yeah,
our
behind
deen.
Islam, yeah.
In our deen. As opposed to the importance of the deen, which is accountability. We are
Yes.
each responsible for our own selves. And,
Mhm,
and the result that you're getting from me is a
mhm,
consequence of what you have given to me. I so one thing I try to teach people a lot is,
mhm,
and I know we have to wrap up in a minute, inshallah,
mhm.
is to explain to people the consequences of what they're getting and then give them those consequences, because when you don't, you teach people that there is no consequence, or
Right.
it's kind of like a casino.
Mhm.
The reason people keep pulling the slot machine lever is because
Mhm.
you never know which one is going to be the jackpot, and so people will keep coming to you if they know that there's no consequence. They're
Yeah,
going to keep coming to you and they're going to say, well, I'm just going to pull a lever and see what I get.
yeah,
It's no this time. Okay. 20 minutes later, I'm going to pull it again.
yeah.
Okay. Yes. Right. And so I'm going to keep doing that if I know eventually I'm
Mhm.
going to get paid out.
Right.
Right. And so when you decide that you're not going to do that, you got to explain to people it's no.
Mhm.
And this is going to be the consequence. And what you're going to get paid out, you can bank on. And you're not going
Right,
to like,
right.
right. And
Mhm.
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that, like, it's interesting because, like, when people over apologize, for example, whenever, like,
Yeah.
like, the second they do something, they're always apologizing, or not
Yeah.
even when they do something. If you're when you struggle with codependency, you feel like you're responsible, so you apologize. Or if you're always the person that's like, you know, like that, I like that example of the lever thing, right? Like, if people are always used to you being the person who they can walk all over, or you can, oh, like, he's gonna always apologize, or he's gonna always, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
People unfortunately like learn by how we respond, right?
Yeah.
Like, we teach people in a sense, and I'm a little hesitant to even say that statement because I don't want people taking responsibility for other people's behavior.
Correct. Correct.
But how
There's the
we
balance.
learn from that, right? And we learn how to then adjust. And I want to say that, like, in Islam, Islam does not promote codependency. You asked me a question earlier about like how much assertiveness. I actually think by definition, assertiveness is on its own completely okay because it's actually already in the middle spot, right? So
Yes.
like it's already in the balance. So there isn't, we don't need to adjust assertiveness. In fact, assertiveness is that middle space between aggression and then on the other end, passiveness, right? So like
Yes.
you
Mashallah.
when you work with people on anger management, you a lot of times you'll see what happen is they'll start off on the one extreme where they'll be really angry, and
Yeah.
then in their work they'll go all the
They
way to
overcorrect.
passiveness where they're now afraid to be angry.
Correct.
And then you want to get them to that middle ground where it's
Yeah.
like you can be angry, but you don't have to express it in that aggressive way. And I
Correct.
don't think anger itself is really the issue. I mean, I think that as human beings, like in
Mhm.
Islam, we're like, if we never get angry, we don't have a backbone. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, we're just gonna be a leaf in the wind, right? And
Yes.
like if
Yes.
things that upset Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do not upset us, for example,
Correct. Correct.
you know, and that's the key, right? To be more to your anger, to let it be in line with what is
Righteous.
with
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, what really affects people, what affects your own sense of well-being as well, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that what's happening now, and it's like people are not even just scared of being, I think in their fear of being aggressive, they're also afraid to just speak up. And
Yes.
in if you look at the Sira, and this is, I think, just the power, the miracle of the Sira is that the
Alhamdulillah.
Sira shows you the real life examples of these
Right.
lessons. And
Right.
so my favorite companion is Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, because I feel like he perfected assertiveness.
Allah.
And it's interesting, right? Because we talked about people's upbringing and backgrounds, like how that impacts their psychology. But Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he had a very aggressive father,
Yes.
right? And he had a father who was abusive, right? Like who would call him names,
Mhm.
right? And Omar radiallahu anhu talked about how his father didn't give him like a kind word, you know, and like, you know, he like his father would beat him as well.
Mhm.
So, but Omar, he if you look at his like his life and his interactions, you see like he was very self-accountable, and you could see
Yeah.
how like he was very critical of himself. But he was assertive. He didn't transgress the rights of
Yeah.
people,
But he was also someone not to be trifled with.
not to be trifled with. Yeah, and they knew
Yes.
they knew that he wasn't like Abu Bakr, right? And
Yeah.
Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu wasn't a pushover.
Mhm.
See, people think like, oh, if you're kind, you're no. I think Abu Bakr was assertive, you
Alhamdulillah.
know, and I think that Omar was assertive. It just different approaches, and so we need to normalize being assertive. And I think
Yes.
and that's in our deen, being able to speak up, like, you know, in you could see even in their gatherings, they'll say like, no, that is not right, or that is
Yeah.
not, you know. And it's like we're so afraid now to like to just
Yeah.
speak.
To
You
be
know.
shouted down. I don't think it's always necessarily that we're afraid to speak just on its face. It's we're afraid to speak to be shouted down. So Omar, radiallahu anhu, his reaction to all of the difficulties, the abuses that he went through was to become tougher.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's the opposite, right? Like again, you're talking about polar opposites, right?
Mhm.
Like he went the other way. He was at the upper limits of assertiveness, right? Like let's just be
Yeah,
fair.
yeah. Let's
He
call it
was
what
at
it
the
is.
upper
Like,
limits of
because
assertiveness.
even the people said, right? Like people
Yes,
commented on the difference between him and
correct. Right. He wasn't just like mildly assertive, right? Like he wasn't just kind of like,
yeah,
you know, but he was on the upper levels of it, right? But
yeah,
we still need to learn from some of that, right? But other people, they go to the lower levels of it where they just kind of get bowled over,
yeah,
right? And the reality of it is that we wanna try to be through the middle, but a lot of that comes from you internalize a lot of that negativity about yourself. You internalize the gaslighting of the other people or the blame of the other
yeah.
people. There's something wrong with me. So if you have a problem with what I'm saying, even if you're the one who created the
Mhm.
situation, it must be something wrong
Yeah,
with me. It must be
yeah,
something that I'm doing here,
yeah.
right? Because I'm used to just internalizing that. And This is a complicated concept I think that we should come to one day. Um, when we talk about narcissistic injuries,
Mhm.
right? The narcissistic injury is not that you're a narcissistic person, me, and you don't care
Mhm.
about anyone else, but in psychology, the narcissistic meaning like about the self,
Mhm.
right? Relating to my self-image and who I see myself as a person, who I understand
Yeah.
myself to be. When you have an injury that affects who you see yourself as a person, the bleeding of that injury tends to be narcissistic,
Mm.
that nature, where everything that happens
It's my
is
fault.
is about you. What a
Mhm.
person did or didn't do, if they showed up or didn't show up, if they took care of their responsibility or not, if they're fighting with someone else or not, if whatever the people around you
Mhm.
are doing, it's somehow a consequence of what you did or didn't do, even if it doesn't involve you. If my sibling didn't take care of what he needed to take care of for our mother, it's my fault.
Mm.
Why? I should have followed up with him. I
Mhm.
should have done this. I could have done that. How can I have been involved in this where even externally, as a third person, I feel responsible,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
when you have that negative perception of yourself, you kind of just pull everything in toward you
Yeah.
that harms you,
What happens. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's we'll talk more about it
Yeah.
inshallah. I know we
But I
talk
think
about
that's so important because I think people always think of like when they think narcissistic, they think of the personality disorder or they think
yeah,
of like the abuser, right?
yeah,
But when you're a victim of narcissism, when you're a victim of gaslighting, when you're a victim of a narcissistic abuser, you still get that narcissistic energy because what the abuser does is that he makes you think that everything is your fault,
correct.
that whatever's happening in the world, you are the center cause. And
Hmm.
so you go out into the world and you think, okay, well then, whatever exists that is wrong is
Yep,
about me. It's my
yep,
fault, and
yep.
so not necessarily that you're a narcissist where like you're thinking like, oh, the
I'm better
world
than
has to
you.
revolve around
Yeah.
me. It's not like that. So I just want to differentiate.
Yes, but it's another kind of world revolving around me, right?
Yeah.
Like the world is revolving around my failures and my shortcomings.
Mhm.
If the bus is late, it's because the universe hates me,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's that kind
Hallelujah.
of thinking.
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah.
kind of thinking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
And so I look, I know we subhanAllah, we have so
It's a
many
good
other
topic.
topics to get to,
Yeah.
inshallah,
Mhm.
but we'll stop here. I know we got to stop here. Bismillah. We'll come back next week,
Yeah.
inshallah. Jazakallah
Mhm.
khairan. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you, guys.
Send us email, comments, whatever you need to do. Suggest topics to us, inshallah. We're gonna
Yeah,
we're
let
gonna
us
start
know.
incorporating them in each of our episodes.
Yeah,
Uh,
sounds good.
Assalamu alaikum wa
Okay.
rahmatullahi wa
Hi,
barakatuh.
everyone.